A lot of people don't know about Chris is that he manages not one, but 3 businesses simultaneously. I have no idea how he does it. And their latest venture from himself and his brother is called Big Bad Flower. And if you're ever looking for some interesting, flowers, that's the place to check out. Colin O'Shipley is the founder, along with his wife, Karen, of O'Shipley Acres in Southern California. They've done some great work with the veterans community in particular, and in bringing those guys back into farming. Pam Marone really needs no introduction. She is a one-woman force of nature. Pam founded Marone Bioinnovation. She was the first employee, and last year she took it public. This is only, I believe, the 3rd company that you scaled up from nothing to great heights and sold on. Marone Bioinnovations is a biopesticide firm. So they developed some very interesting alternatives to traditional chemicals for both indoor and outdoor use. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Robert here, and I'm going to give Colin his microphone back.
So thank you, Nicola. I'm excited to introduce everybody, and I'm gonna let you introduce yourselves since you know yourselves better than I do. And I also want you to say in your introductions, just since we're the first panel at a conference, sort of define for us what you think indoor farming is. So what do you call it?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Colin Archiplet, and my wife and I founded Archie's Acres, which is a small farm in just outside of San Diego. And when we started Archie's Acres, it wasn't because we had this dream about farming. We bought a dilapidated avocado farm, and we started paying for water. If you know much about water in San Diego, it's all imported primarily from the Colorado River, and we're at the end of the tap. So we got our first water bill, and we decided that things had to change, and that a few acres of avocados wasn't going to pay the bills in one of the avocado capitals of the world. So we built a couple greenhouses, built it with NFT hydroponic systems, and then we went and got our organic certification. So we do what we call hydro-organics. And then we teamed up with Don Ishiguchi over here at Whole Foods, and they were our first customer, and our products are located in Orange County and San Diego, and we're slowly creeping up into LA and the Southwest region. Archie's Acres is also known for the VSAT program, Veteran Sustainable Agricultural Training Program. This program we initially started to transition military, separating military members into the agriculture industry, because we think there's great opportunity for startup businesses here right now, specifically. And we think the leadership skills of the military community was a great fit for that. And there's just a huge talent pool there. It's not being tapped into after millions of dollars that we invest in these people at the young level. So since we created that program, we now teamed up with Cal Poly's agricultural school. The program is now open to the general public, so we have service members as well as veterans, and then just average civilians come through the 6-week program. It's worth about 17 credits, as well as a whole slew of certificates. And the idea is this agricultural entrepreneurial incubator program where they can then leave, go connecting with lenders, or whatever the case may be, and start these businesses. And going back to Robert's question about what the indoor ag means to me, I think it's just an industry that's creating more opportunities. The key thing about indoor ag is increased yields on minimum footprints. And right now there's a lot of relatively small vacant lots that can be transitioned into agricultural producing systems, tapping into that local market that we were just talking about, and reclaiming some of these industrial buildings and stuff like that are no longer being used as well. So I think there's great opportunities. There's a lot of barriers to entry as well, but those are where the opportunities lie.
Hi, I'm Pam Marone, CEO of Marone Bioinnovations. There is a huge conversation going on now in the media and elsewhere about how we're going to feed the world. 7 billion people going to 9 billion people by 2050. And what you hear is that you still need chemicals, of course, to as inputs to control pests and improve crop production. And also, there's quite a number of people and policymakers and governments and so forth that said, of course you need genetically modified crops. Well, what I'm here to say, and what I spent my entire career doing, is saying that there is the third leg, there is an alternative, and it is biologicals. These are naturally occurring microorganisms and extracts of plants. And nature, thank you, and nature identical compounds that can be used to control pests and increase yields. And that's what I've spent my 30 years doing. And I started my career at Monsanto, and I was in charge of the insect biology group, and I was hired to start a new group developing ways to control insects without the use of chemicals. And I screened over 150,000 microorganisms and fell in love with the idea of using natural products. I was recruited by Denmark-based Novo Nordisk in 1990 to start a company in Davis, California called Entertech, which was to do the same, looking for naturally occurring microorganisms. They sold us to our largest competitor after 5 years when they had some other priorities. And then I started with AgroQuest in 1995. AgroQuest was a venture capital-backed company, and I raised $60 million in venture capital and almost got it public. Filed for the offering about 3 weeks before 9/11, and then 9/11 happened and didn't get the offering done. And then, unfortunately, like many other founders have experienced, new investors came in, crammed down. I can explain that if you ever want to know about it. Horror story of where my final stock and all my friends and family were wiped out. So in 2012, AgroQuest was sold to Bayer Crop Science for close to $500 million, and I did not get anything from that. So I started up again because I'm a determined woman. And this company, and as fast as I could go, recreating what I've done in the past, but better in finding even better solutions of naturally occurring microorganisms that control insects, control nematodes, weeds, plant diseases, and also reduce drought stress and enhance crop yields. And took the company public on NASDAQ last year, August 2nd. And I am pleased to say that I'm really happy I'm here while my stock is hitting all-time low since the So that's the vagaries of going public. So we can talk about that. Indoor ag is quite broad. You heard from Paul. You heard from other panelists, and you heard from our other one. But it's little tiny operations all the way to big greenhouses and everything in between.
Well, my name's Chris, as you guys already learned. I am with Ford Americas. In the way that I am able to handle 3 small businesses, I have good business partners. So I'm one of the founders of Ford Americas. And what we are is we're a wholesale supply company working with commercial horticulture companies. And that ranges anywhere from floriculture to greenhouse grown vegetables and vertical farms. My idea for what indoor ag is, it varies. It's probably much different than what you guys are thinking here in the audience today. I look at everything from micropropagation or tissue culture production, all the way through young plant production of leaf mother stock plants for floriculture, follow that into greenhouse grown and controlled environment agriculture, and anything in between. I think as a whole, and in order to answer a lot of these questions, it's important that we have maybe a bigger view of what indoor ag could be, or what it already is, but we don't necessarily identify with.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess my first question is really about the industry as a whole. This isn't a large revenue driver yet in the U.S. So how do you scale this industry, and what does scale even look like? Is it more operations? Is it a larger percentage of the food sales? Is it owning the local food market? What is scale with this industry?
Well, I think, in some respects, we can look to our European friends, particularly the Dutch, who have been doing controlled environment agriculture for a long time, and I think some of their key success is automation. The thing about ag is it requires labor. Labor is expensive, and it's hard to find these days. So automating as much as you can to reduce those operating costs and labor I think it's critical to the indoor agriculture industry. The challenge with indoor agriculture as a whole, particularly automation, is cost of startup, which is pretty common with all farm operations. But in the indoor agriculture industry, you're looking at easily $10 a square foot and go up to $20+ a square foot, depending on what type of operation you're looking at. You take that to a conventional agricultural lender, and they'll probably laugh at you. I think you're spending $20 a square foot to build out because they don't understand the concept. So, but I think in terms of scaling, it requires automation. It requires a good product that nobody's tapped into yet, and it requires capital.
I think it's also on the crop side. I mean, we've got people sitting in the audience today that have scaled up pretty significantly, from village farms in the back corner to guys that have been with Bushel Boy. I mean, we do have indoor ag that has scaled up in this country. As an industry, I think it's looking at different crops. I think expanding the crops that we're able to offer is ultimately what's going to allow us to scale up as an industry.
I would concur that scaling does require capital. A lot of the operations are probably undercapitalized. There hasn't been very many investors that would invest in any ag or food space. But now it's becoming sexier, so there are, and because there have been exits and investors have made money, and so therefore there's a lot of investors coming into this space. So I think scaling does require capital, but it's really a good time to raise money actually right now.
So speaking of scale, I think there are a lot of operations out there that are looking to scale and expand, but I think they're thwarted in this expansion by a lack of available human capital with the knowledge and training to run these operations. So I guess I'll start you, Colin, since you have the VSAC program, and just ask you what's the solution, where do you find these people?
I don't think I have the idea of where you find these people. I think they're actually coming. I think the younger crowd is very intrigued by the idea. I don't think they know where to start. And I think the key to get people into this space and finding that talent is to show them that there's opportunity. And I think the past several decades, you looked at the agricultural space, you didn't see a lot of opportunity. The family farms were failing. And it was buy 800 acres at the peak or get out, get big or get out philosophy. But now, especially with controlled environments and whatnot, and the expected rise in food prices over the next several years, there's more and more opportunities to buy local. The organic industry, which last year was a $31 billion industry, 81% of Americans are buying food that's organic. And again, the local thing, which definition varies depending on where you're at, but those are all creating great opportunities. The family farm has more money now than the non-family farm. Now, part of that's supplemented by off-farm income, but it's just presenting these opportunities to people and allowing them to exploit it. I think is the key to get people in the space.
One would think that an R&D-based company like ours would be easy to find people, but it's actually not. That is one of our biggest challenges, is finding qualified talent. And we have jobs open all the time, especially on the commercial side. R&D, I can have interns from UC Davis, and then the good ones we can then hire, and then we can train them. But on the commercial side, finding salespeople and product development people, field development people, technical support, sales, is really quite difficult. I've taken folks right out of school and trained them, and then have older baby boomers like me, but there's a paucity of folks in the middle.
I don't know. Good answer. I think it's looking into general ag industry. I think there's a lot of people, a lot of young people in general ag that have degrees from agrarian universities that are looking for new opportunities. I think to some degree, being an indoor farmer or an indoor agriculturalist is a little bit easier than being a field farmer. You take out a lot of those variables that you can't manage in the field. Not to say that it's easy, but it might be easier and something to learn once you've learned it. So taking those young people, giving them an opportunity to succeed, and then allowing them to grow within your organization. But the real answer is I don't know.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, Pamela, I have a specific question for you. You've started a number of businesses in the ag space that successfully scaled, speaking of scale. And what advice do you have for the startups or early stage indoor farming companies here today on how to scale and achieve economic viability, raise money?
Wow, that's a that's a whole seminar. But a few things. Taking money is, I actually am really a fan of those who can bootstrap and do it and then fund themselves, because taking money from investors is actually a real difficult thing. It changes your life dramatically, so you should be prepared to see that your partners or investors are married to you. And therefore, picking the right ones is really, really important. So really understanding what your value system is and who you are, and then matching your investors. This is when you're starting up in private company I'm talking about. And finding those investors that share your values is really critical, because if you're across purposes, it's not going to work. And really important to understand what the investors want. That even if they're in for socially responsible reasons, it's really still about them making money. And so that's why the marriage is important. The marriage concept is important. And also look for partners and investors of people who have already run businesses. Because if you have investors who have never been in business, when something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, then there's panic. And it's really hard to explain to someone why you're off your business plan, especially if you're with plants or biological organisms. So it's really important to have a board of directors and advisors of people who have actually run businesses.
So I guess I'm curious, where in your opinion do you feel the indoor farming industry is going to experience the greatest growth, whether it's in urban areas, great climates that are almost perfect where you don't have high heating and cooling costs, or deserts or really temperate areas?
I'd argue all the above. I think you're going to see some operations be extremely successful and others fail, just like any other industry. I don't think anybody has a patent on a good idea and a good farm model. Like Paul talked about earlier, there's various different systems. It depends on the crop you're growing, where you're growing it. But I think the areas where it's most difficult to grow crops is the areas with the greatest opportunities. And that's oftentimes in the urban environment. It's oftentimes in the areas with the most roughest weather and so forth. If you bring fresh food to those areas that still have the great flavors and all that stuff, that's where the opportunity is.
I think it can succeed in any of those regions, but I do not think that it will succeed in the same way in those regions. I think that probably the model for a successful indoor ag facility, depending on your geography, is going to take a look at the natural resources that are available to them and then build a facility to take advantage of those natural resources. So maybe the model where you have a franchise opportunity and you're dropping the exact same facility in Denver and Orlando may not be the best model, but it may be that a farm that is some collaboration between Denver and Orlando, maybe both of those do have good opportunity, or anywhere else in the world.
I would agree. I think that the last thing you want to see is developing an indoor ag industry that models non-sustainability of outdoor systems.
And then I guess sort of to that question, there are all these operations out there. There are the gigantic ones that are accounting for most of the revenue, and then there are smaller scale operations that are 5,000 square feet, 1,200 square feet. Can you speak to sort of the viability of the smaller scale operations and versus larger scale, sort of how the industry might pan out in the future, what you see happening?
I think the next few years, I don't know how many years it's going to be, but if we take the next 5 to 10 years probably, I think both the small and large have their place. Because there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen within that space as that crop, as the diversity of crops that are offered is built. With its greenhouse tomatoes, I think we're already seeing, those guys, they've been in the United States for at least 25 years, I would guess, maybe a little bit longer than that. And they're growing at a very fast rate. There's people in this audience today I know that have, farms as small as, 500 to 1,000 square feet, and I think they're finding success. But there's a lot of innovation that we need to, as an industry, to continue to develop before we'll be able to answer that question. I mean, a lot of this, depending on the climate you're in, I know there are a bunch of people here from the lighting industry. A lot of our success in varying climates depend on how well we can light a crop indoors year-round. In some cases, we can do it fairly well. In other cases, we can't. So I was talking to the guys from Freight Farms earlier, and they said, we all have these different models. That's one of the things that may be slowing us down right now is that we have a lot of one-offs going, and we invest a lot of time in trying to figure out how to build each one of these systems. So that may be the other thing that causes us to increase at some point in time is that some of the systems may start to look a little bit more similar to one another, and we're not constantly building or fabricating components to every individual system to fit that one farm. I think there will be some consolidation. I think there will be collaboration, and that may help us grow a little bit quicker as well.
And I would just say, I agree with you. I think there's room for both guys going a few thousand square feet to people growing dozens of acres in controlled environments. The unique thing about the food industry today is people are no longer just going to the grocery store and buying whatever it is that ingredient they need. They're looking at who's growing it, what's the story of that person, and it creates this whole new landscape for these private label small farms, and that's where we started in the 1800 square foot greenhouse. We've grown considerably since then, but it was because the will for buyers like Don to bring in small farmers and to tell our story and to demo our products, and it created this following, and it gave us some room.
I'm on the board of the Organic Farming Research Foundation, and we have some of the very best organic farmers, both indoor and outdoor, on our board. And what I've learned from them is that they create an ecosystem. Some of the very small farmers on our board have an ecosystem with the restaurants, and so they're very successful because the restaurants are buying from them constantly, and they're have that ecosystem of suppliers.
If I could just add that, as a farmer, you gotta expect what do you want to do the rest of your life. Running a 5,000 square foot greenhouse is probably you, maybe your spouse, and that's your life. Running tens of thousands of square feet or a couple acres, you as the owner are not farming. You're managing a business and you're managing other people. And so that's a completely different lifestyle. And it's really up to the operator of what does he want his lifestyle to look like? Does he want to be a farmer, or does he want to manage people and do all that? So it's completely different.
So I guess sort of speaking to your comment about how the consumers are going to markets, they're looking for local foods, they're looking at other farmers. I think that you're in the Southern California area where there's a higher consciousness of local food, but sort of across the country, from my research, I found that it's not as apparent. It's growing, even though there's sort of focus on purchasing local food. But with respect to indoor farming and, let's say, conventional hydroponics, what do you think needs to be done about market education with respect to the products that are produced, the market education for consumers, retailers, restaurateurs, wholesalers, distributors? Because what I've found is that if it's a conventionally produced product, they're still looking at it conventional or it's organic. So, for example, you've got producers like you're organic, so you can go out and say you're organic, and nobody might ever know that it's produced in a greenhouse. So what needs to be done to really get the word out that indoor is healthy or it's safe or it's pesticide free, and what's going to make distributors care about it, what's going to make consumers care about it, and how are you going to help that happen?
That's a tough one. I don't know how to educate consumers other than just continue to do what we do, continue to tell our story, and I think hopefully people support us in that. But going back to your comment about Southern California is definitely the whole food movement down there. It doesn't seem so in other places. We thought about that quite a bit as well. A little story about one of our graduates who was going back to Alabama, and she wanted to be an organic farmer, but we didn't know how well that being organic would fly in a place like Alabama. But when she actually got to Alabama, did market research, she sold a product before she even put a seed in the ground, which is perfect for her business. But I think the key is the demand for either organic or local is much greater than supply. And that's why it hasn't really hit some of these areas. And the trends typically start on the coast and move to the middle. So I think where we don't find that consciousness, as you describe it, of local and organic is, again, where the greater opportunity is.
The only thing I would add to that is I think quality probably trumps local and organic to some, if you have a label that says local and organic, but then quality inside the package is subpar, and I'm not sure it matters. I think for us, if we're building these new businesses, I think if we build consistently high quality products, and then we add those other things to the labels, I think that's ultimately what's going to drive success. But without the high quality and without the consistency, I don't know why they would want to look to the greenhouse for that solution, look to an indoor agricultural facility for that solution.
So then you're saying that it's high enough quality to pay the premiums, or are you thinking that if the technology catches up and you have efficiencies and you can sort of produce at an equivalent price and it'll grow?
I'm not saying people will pay a premium for high quality, and I'm sure there are people that argue with me with that, but I think that people are going to pay a premium for high quality, and a lot of it comes back to your brand. And if you have your own brand, and you go to the store with that brand, and the consumer gets accustomed to buying a locally grown brand that's high quality consistently, I think that's going to take care of itself. If you sell to a distributor or a broker who puts your product in with everything else, and it loses the face, but it may be locally grown, but let's say it's locally grown and it's 10 growers, and consistency varies through the course of the season, what faith is the consumer going to have in that brand?
The whole issue of educating consumers is a real difficult one, and there's lots of organizations doing it, like on the organic side, like Organic Consumers Associations and others, Organic Trade Association, and I don't think even they have the answers of how you do that. And there is definitely some confusion of GM-free, organic, and local. But suffice to say, I agree with Colin that there's more demand for organic and local, both growing than there is supply.
And just to add one thing, I think us farmers are actually making consumers more confused and trying to educate them. We picked up this little thing of oatmeal this morning. It was like a little cup, and you add hot water. And there was about 6 different symbols on it saying GMO-free, kosher, all this other stuff. And I think that just is only confusing customers as opposed to actually educating them. I think I'm at the point of label fatigue. We got QR codes, we got organic symbols, and also free trade, and it gets a little bit out of control.
So then you think with all those labels, then you think it's going to be the individual brands, say Archie's Acres, that's going to really help distinguish the localness and propel it?
I agree with you, but that puts a lot of responsibility on the farmer too, right? Because the farmer and his family have to be doing those demos in the store to draw that one-on-one FaceTime with the customer to get the customer to buy into their story and so forth. But that's something that the conventional farmer of 800 acres in the valley can't do, and that's where the opportunity is.
All right, taking a little detour. So today, I think revenues and successes in the indoor farming industry are primarily generated by hydroponic operations. But there are other systems what role are they going to play in the future?
I guess I'll go with this one. There's a lot of different systems out there, and everybody selling one says they got the one that's going to make you the most successful. I think, in terms of soilless agriculture, it's not new. We've been doing this for centuries, literally. And there's certain production models that have proven their success throughout time. There are new models coming on the market daily, and I think they have a lot of ground to make way to prove themselves. But I would look at what systems in terms of soilless agriculture have proven themselves over time to be the most successful, and what is the newer or alternative systems offering that's making them better than these kind of tried and true systems.
And I'd add to that simplicity. I think in watching growers struggle with new systems and watching growers master systems, the simpler the system is, the easier it's going to be able to maintain. Again, the more consistency you can have in production. And as Archie was saying, or as Colin was saying, I'm sorry, there's also more support for the older systems. So when you run into a problem, there's a network of consultants that are out there. And depending on your skill set or your comfort level with being a grower, I think that would also determine whether it's aeroponics or aquaponics, what sort of support's out there to help you be successful.
I guess when you speak of older systems, are you speaking of the systems that are mainly used by larger operations that can scale down to smaller operations? Or, are these larger systems, I guess, sort of...
We're talking about irrigation systems is what we're talking about. That's what it comes down to. All these systems are just different ways of delivering water and nutrients. So, yeah. What system is the most proven over time, and what system is the simplest to manage, would be the direction that I would recommend a new grower go. That's really what we're talking about is irrigation systems.
Yeah, and in terms of the hydroponics world, there's really only 3, maybe a few others that have the large guys have adopted onto, Dutch buckets, NFTs, floating rafts, and a few others. But you got to think, some of these operations, these big scale guys are dumping $1 million plus per acre into these structures, putting their systems in glass and whatnot. With all this money, you don't think they've done the research and figured out what are some of the best yielding systems and why. And so, I was told, get into business. To start off, don't innovate, imitate. And that's one of the things I would say imitate on is what are the big successful guys doing, what kind of systems are they implementing, why, and that probably makes sense for you to do something similar. And this point about the support is spot on too. I've never thought about that, but when you get too innovative, there's not a whole lot of people out there that can help you on things in advance.
I guess in terms of the systems, there are costs associated, and I guess how are you finding, what are you hearing from sort of smaller new farmers, how they're finding the funding to get these operations going, the challenges they're facing?
Crowdfunding is a new source, and I have a farmer friend in Missouri who just bought a piece of equipment through Indiegogo. So I think that's a really cool, really wonderful way to start out.
We work very closely with the Farm Service Agency. That's where most of our graduates are borrowing money from. It's a USDA program. Their interest rates are dirt cheap. It's nearly free money. And amortization rates are great as well, but it is a government loan, so it's a lot of responsibility. But there's more and more suppliers that are also offering financing, and that's pretty exciting. But, I think talk about solar and kind of innovation is funding solar in the past, and I think that's where indoor agriculture industry is going to go. It's going to find innovative funding solutions and leasing options and stuff like that. That's going to kind of tear down some of the barriers to entries in terms of those costs.
I guess let's talk about energy costs, and because that's a huge barrier, I think, to profitability for a lot of operations. How do you see these being reduced in the future, or are they just always going to be a huge persistent problem?
I think it depends on where you put the farms. We're going to have to, depending on where the farms are located, you're going to have to look for supplemental light sources. Depending on where the farms are located, you're going to have to either deal with heating or cooling loads. The more extreme those needs are, the more you're going to have to look at energy costs. They're always going to be part of that. Unless we look to GMO to solve those problems of what the crops currently need.
Farmers are in the energy business. We convert energy into organic matter. And so energy is a critical input. I think we'll figure out ways to reduce energy costs by using variable speed pumps and new lighting systems like LED and plasma. The more popular those become, the more affordable they become, so it'll be more available to the average consumer. But I also think we are in a very unique time where alternative energy systems are being more competitive with on-the-grid fossil fuel systems, particularly with those innovative financing solutions from like solar companies and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think we can create farms completely inside a building running either high-intensity discharge lights or LEDs with being fully powered by solar systems and essentially off the grid with zero energy impact. So, I think it's an exciting time. I don't know if that's me.
What do you think the commercial hydroponics industry is going to look like in 10 years?
I guess I'll start. I'm actually relieved to see where the hydroponic industry is today. When I started in 2006, you mentioned the word hydroponic, and everybody thinks one thing. And now it's going hippie lettuce in college with your roommates, whatever. But yeah, now we can sit in this room and talk about hydroponics and have a serious conversation about it. So I think hopefully we'll see more commercial suppliers jump on board and just increase access to commercial products. If you go into your average hydroponic shop in your town, they're not catering to commercial food growers, and that's kind of a disparity. And conventional agricultural suppliers really haven't jumped on board so much yet, but I think they're going to get there. Obviously, companies like Ford America and so forth are somewhat leading the way in those respects, and I hope to see those type of menus and access grow.
I think it is just going to continue to grow on what we've seen in the vine crop industry with greenhouses growing with tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. I'm hoping to see those types of businesses maybe expand their product portfolio. I think we are starting to see that with some of the larger growers right now. And again, I think if we use indoor ag and you use hydroponics, it really depends on what we're able to do with the product offering. I do believe that we will see some major things happen with seed companies. I do believe if we look at the ag system and the way we get seeds to plants, to fruit or produce to the homeowner, I think that we're going to see a lot of growth in the next 10 years in that part of the supply chain.
So a question for you, Colin. So you have got your one operation, and I know, or at least in the past, you talked about scaling and sort of how are you looking at scaling in terms of moving into new markets? Were you investigating demand for the products? What's your strategy to scale Archie's Acres?
That's a good question. For one, I believe it's slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Like you were speaking of earlier, you start working with investors and you take on a lot of responsibility. So you want to make sure you're in a good spot before you do. You don't want to take them on too soon and dilute your ownership and end up owning a very small part of this company that you believe in. So prove the model. But the key is to sell your crop before you invest in it. Before you build a farm, wherever we're going to go, is we're going to find if there's a great enough market opportunity for our size, and build off of that concept. There's a lot of other companies already doing that legwork for you. Where are your buyers investing in, what communities and so forth. So, those are some of the things we're looking at. And so Archie's Acres still intends to grow and have multiple locations, very similar to Bright Farms, and continue to work on it.
I guess another question I have is, I mean, how large do you think the indoor farming market gets? I mean, are we looking forward 100 years, let's say, global warming, major climate change? I mean, do you all see this industry as supplanting or adding to the pie, taking away from it? What's your opinion?
How big does the industry get? I think there's a lot of things there's a lot of questions and answers that need to be had that I don't know if we're ready to answer in this room today. But if you look at water, and you look at diesel prices, you look at dietary change, those are really big picture topics that will have a big impact on how this indoor ag movement continues to grow. What it becomes, I think it's going to have a huge role. I just don't know exactly what it will become. I think it's going to have a huge role, again, in the entire ag industry. But it will not look the same everywhere.
But I don't know what it's going to look like. I think it probably will bubble and contract a little bit over time. But I think the greatest thing about indoor ag opportunities is it's going to bring not only good food, but it's going to bring the farming lifestyle to people who never had that opportunity before. Whether you're growing up in Watts and you never even seen a farm and you're in a food desert, or you're living in a rural community which is smallest now than ever in American history, and those communities have been hit pretty hard. The indoor agriculture industry is going to bring opportunities to each of those locations and help improve those economies, provide jobs and good food. I don't know how big it's going to get. I think it'll probably still be a niche. It just doesn't make sense to grow everything indoors. And it'll be interesting to see, if global warming is as real as it is. We're going to start seeing a lot more crops growing up in Canada that typically are growing in the United States, and you'll see a shift in what we grow here in the United States. But there's still a lot of innovation here, so I don't know where it's going to go.
California's Secretary of Ag, Karen Ross, likes to use the words big tent because there's a stress between large industrial ag and local and small. And she likes to say that, now and in the future, all of the segments are going to coexist, and there is should be a big tent mentality.
I think this is actually a good segue into audience Q&A. So I don't know where the mics are, but something like that.
In biology and our balance, we've always learned that monoculture is trouble. When elm trees all across one town, one boat comes in, the elm trees are gone. We've had a problem in New England with the Asian horned beetle. They had one tree that they planted, Asian horned beetle comes in and all wiped out. And yet, what we're saying here is that we want to have a monoculture, I think, in greenhouse. And that seems microbiologically dangerous. So I guess I'd like to hear how you guys would address that concern.
I think to some degree we are talking about monoculture, or at least crops that all have similar growing habits, let's call it. Because we're going to have to build systems that are going to fit, that they're going to be easy to maintain and easy to scale up. So we're not going to be able to put a wide variety of crops underneath the same roof. And especially if we look to automation as being a part of this growth, the crops are going to have to handle this in a certain way. They're going to need similar production schedules. So I think we are talking monoculture to some degree, and then partnering plants that work well together. That's what we're going to be doing.
And I'll just add that the monoculture and greenhouse industry is dramatically different than the monoculture that we're used to reading. I mean, we're not talking about like the almond industry in the valley where it's literally tens of thousands of acres but nothing but almonds, or corn in the Midwest. I mean, we're talking about Howling's tomatoes. I don't know if Howling's got it here, but they're 120 acres of tomatoes and peppers. So they fit that monocrop model, but you're only talking about 120 acres. That's pretty small in the big picture of things in terms of size. And I know in our greenhouses, even though we're primarily growing one crop, we're always trying to increase biodiversity. Our primary control pest is predator insects, primary control of diseases, is beneficial microorganisms and so forth. So the crop might be the same, but we're always trying to increase that biodiversity.
And just to round that out, the one thing that we are able to do once we go indoors is we are able to work with exclusion and sanitation to manage some of that pest pressure. So as we innovate to build better and better facilities, we will be able to control some of these pest pressures just by the facility itself, and then good operating procedures that allow us to keep the pest out.
Question in the purple shirt back there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about going to Mars. There's a lot of talk about going to Mars in the future. How do you think space exploration is going to affect the indoor ag industry?
Where's Gene Jack Mountain? There he is. Well, let's see. Within the last few weeks, we just sent a growing system up to the space station. I think it's called Veggie 1. That one went up, and there's another system that's not far behind it. If we are to continue that exploration, then we are going to innovate in that area. That may be an area for us and institutes like the University of Arizona to continue to push the limits of how we know how to grow and what we know how to grow.
And if I can add to that, there's not a huge market in space yet. So I think there certainly need innovation from trying to supply those folks going to Mars and all that stuff. But I think only that technology is somewhat limited to how we can apply it here. So I don't think we're it's an apples and oranges comparison.
All right, we got a question in the back.
So VC, to get VC funding, they're often looking to finance a company that's building an asset. And how many of these companies are building assets versus how many are building businesses?
That's a very good question. And there are other you know about slow money, right? There's other alternatives for financing besides the traditional VCs that are funding the types of businesses here. So in terms of the VCs that I have gotten money from, and quite a bit, it's a mix. There's many who are funding assets, and then others who are there who believe in funding a long-term business. So it really depends on the individual. No one size fits all, and you really have to work and find ones that fit you and what you're trying to build.
Thanks, Matt.
I would say just add that I think most people in this space are building businesses. I think there's probably some guys just looking to build something and sell in a few years. I think most people, this is a chosen lifestyle. They want to scale because they believe in that concept, but I don't think they're really looking to get rid of it in 5 years. Their exit is much longer out, if at all. So I think, it's interesting. I'm not an investor, and I'm not very savvy in that, but it's just kind of an interesting landscape in respect.
Question in the blue or light.
There's been discussion of both scale and financing in this town, and I come from the natural world, which is that area is served by subways, and so I'm a little nervous out here, but within cities, the issue of scale can be helped by the fact not only that 70% of the world's population is moving to cities, but by city governments which have substantial financing help for bringing family-sustaining jobs into cities. And that also then can affect your human resources program because you have enough money to do training on something like an advanced manufacturing model, so that people actually have real careers, stay with the business, go out and do things on their own. So in urban areas, the scale and the HR issues really combined as advantages.
Very true. There are numerous cities that do have financing for job growth, and absolutely all of them. Well, I'm building a manufacturing plant in Bangor, Michigan, and there's a lot of good city and the state have given some incentives for job growth. Yes.
There's a question somewhere back there.
Back to Lamar's question. The enthusiasm of the young people that will get us through all of this and ultimately get us there. Of course, at least that's our hope. And you can look to a documentary that's coming out called Earth Light that will help answer that question. These arguments. The importance of controlled environments. But we live in today and now, and we're hungry today and now. What I'd like to ask specifically, one question to Pam Maroney about investors and the questions that they bring to an agricultural side of things that we need to respond to. How can we better position ourselves to gain those finances, to work in the development of the business? Because I think that's something that what can we learn? What can they learn? How can we come together to make this connection easier?
You know, it's a really difficult one when you're in ag. I had a Cornell student extern. I'm a Cornell grad and entomology major, and he was shadowing me during this winter break when he was starting up the Globe.com in his dorm room. It was the first ever social networking company pre-Facebook. And he raised $30 million before I ever raised my first dime. And he was the highest run-up on NASDAQ, took his company public, highest run-up on NASDAQ ever in the history of NASDAQ. 6 months later, he was bankrupt. The company went bust, okay? It was at the height of the tech boom. And I was motoring away, working for no salary and so forth, and finally got money and then the company still exists that I built. AgriQuest. It was bought by a big company, but and I didn't make any money on it. But that was not my goal. My goal was to change, agriculture. And so again, it really depends. So I was successful in getting investors because I was communicating I was going to build a big, scalable business that was going to grow, and that's what investors have to see. If you're not going to build a business that's going to grow revenue, fast revenue, but that's really hard to match with ag. And the way I've done it with this company is said, okay, so everyone's looking for the blockbuster. They want me to have an iPad or an iPhone that goes from 0 to billions overnight. That's not what I have. So how do I get the scalable growth that investors want, and how did I do that to be able to attract venture capital and go public? Well, I developed a lower risk model and said, well, biologicals are not going to be blockbuster drugs or blockbuster, $1 billion Roundup or something, but they're going to be smaller wins. But I know how to innovate with those teams of UC data scientists and how to train them and how to get products through quickly and find markets that someone, that fills a market need, and then build a suite of smaller products that roll up to significant revenue. So I built a business model that's attractive, growth up whole, but de-risk how I got there. Okay.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay.
I was just wondering if you could maybe talk about training programs that are available for future farmers in if there's an association for the indoor agriculture community.
Well, I think that our state has been the finest training program in the world for so please check it out. It's open to the public. There's a lot of training programs out there. I was just going to say they're not all created equal. So before you invest in a training program, I've been in some better ones, trust me, out there than others. So do your research before you spend money into a training program, and make sure that people that offer training are already successful. Without our farm, there is no training program. Our farm is what we do at the core. The training program is what we do to feel good about ourselves, whatever. But you want to go to a training program, I think, that has a successful farm model that you can learn from.
And in terms of associations, there's really not an indoor ag association at this point in time. I would imagine that you'll see one in the next 12 to 18 months. I would imagine. Pretty sure you're going to see one within the next 12 to 18 months. It is coming. In terms of training, though, I think one of the questions we feel the most is tell us what to grow. And then I think that's one thing that you need to start with is know what it is that you want to do and then go search out the training. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an indoor ag facility. There's a lot of things that you're going to get. I know like the University of Arkansas has a great greenhouse online management course. There's a lot of the traditional ag universities that can get you a good foundation to what it is you're looking to do. So you really kind of do need to know what you're looking to do before signing up for any of those courses.
If I just add one thing, farming is a small part of being a farmer. You kind of have a jack of all trades. So when you do training, it's important to learn how to grow a crop and so forth. It's also important how to run an ag business as a whole, identify markets, know how to approach branding, all those other things.
All right, so that concludes our panel. Thank you all.